Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. And today's a fun day. We're finally into the range of our pre-draft podcast where I think Nick and I both would admit we have the most fun doing mock drafts, doing my guys, things like that. Today is a dueling 7-round mock draft where both Nick and I will be participating in a mock draft simulator, but different mock draft simulators. We will draft a different team potentially, or the same, we don't know yet, for the New York Giants. And that's the fun part about today's dueling 7-round mock draft. We have not done the draft already. We will be recording it as it goes. So we will be playing out the simulator. We'll be looking into trades if we want to trade. We're allowing trades. And we're just going to let this thing roll out and see how things go. And we will both talk over each of our picks based on how the mock draft simulators run out. We're both using the PFF mock draft simulator because we believe it is probably the most accurate of all the ones out there. But we have set the settings a little bit slightly different on each of ours, so we can hopefully have different draft picks in this. But yeah, I mean, I'm very excited for this. For those of you who can see watching on YouTube, I'm recording from my happy place. This is my happy place. I'm not actually here. I wish I was actually here. And that's Red Rocks. Yeah, that's Red Rocks. That's nice. My happy place. It's the greatest place on earth, literally, for me at least. So it's going to be my background maybe for a few of these. I'm going to keep switching it up. Maybe that's a fun thing I'll do where I'll just change my virtual background every time. Big on this virtual background thing, Nick. You know, you don't have to worry about as much of the setup behind you. You can just, whatever's going on that day, you just, do whatever it is, and I can have some fun with it, and we'll start to do some fun things here.
I understand that, too, because I have a dog, a puppy, and he rips his toys up and he leaves fluff all over my freaking room, all over my studio, and sometimes I go into podcasts, and if you look in the background, you'll see just white fluff just sitting there, and I'm like, damn it, I forgot to clean that up.
He's still doing that?
Oh, yeah, man. I get him toys. That toy it'll last maybe a day.
Did he chew up that $300 bed yet?
No. Well, he tries to hump it sometimes, but I don't allow him to, obviously. So, no, I wouldn't say that's chewed up.
Okay, that's good. That's still alive. You don't want to buy something and have it immediately chewed up, even if he's not really a fan of it yet. Hopefully, he'll come around to it.
He used to love it, but then this is like the funny thing, and you could draw a lot of parallels from this. He used to love it, and then I wasn't home. He found a way to hump it, and now he doesn't really fuck with the bed anymore. And I'm like, oh God, that's a typical male right there, is it not?
That's awesome stuff from your pup, Phoenix. All right, Nick, let's let this thing roll out now. Let's get into this mock draft. So you can make the pick first, your first round pick first. And I would say talk through where the draft went with the first 24 picks before your pick. If you're considering trading out of this pick, if you consider trading up at any point, and then what pick you're going to make if you're staying at the pick and not trading the pick.
Yeah, so we are using PFF's mock draft simulator. And I just ran it, so this is all. I have not had a chance to look over who is available and whatnot. But Joey Porter is gone, Deonte Banks is gone, Brian Branch is gone, Kalijah Cansey is gone, Nolan Smith is gone, Zay Flowers is gone, Miles Murphy is gone, Brian Bresee is gone. So at the top of PFF's board, we're looking at Tennessee tackle Darnell Wright and Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, the two tackles. Obviously, I'm not going to consider tackle. For players that the Giants might be interested in, Will McDonald from Iowa State, the edge is still around. Jordan Addison out of USC, the wide receiver, is still around. Emmanuel Forbes is still around. Felix Anudike-Uzama, BJ Ojolari. These are the types of players who are around. This is not a great scenario. And as the podcast listeners know, I love Emmanuel Forbes. I'm okay with Emmanuel Forbes at 25, but I have 4 trades offered to me. So I'm going to look at these 4 trades. And Dan, I'm really interested because the Eagles are the team that are offering me a trade. And they're the only one that are still in the first round that are offering. Everybody else is like 38, one's in the 50s. I'm not going to entertain that. I want to stay within striking distance to possibly land somebody that I respect and that I like. So I traded the 25th pick, 172nd pick, the 209th, and the 240th pick. So a bunch of picks that weren't even the Giants, and then one of the Giants' late round picks for 30 and 62.
Okay.
So I dropped back 5 spots, and I got 62 as well. I'm fine with punting on those 3 late round picks. I don't really give a crap about that. So I'm going to resume the draft, and we're going to see who the Eagles selected there. And if I'm a betting man, they're going to go with this guy, and they did. They selected Bijan Robinson. They jumped ahead of Dallas. They jumped ahead of Buffalo. And I don't know how Giant fans feel about that. I don't even know how I feel about that. But in this mock draft, I'm cool with sitting here at 30 and selecting Emmanuel Forbes and picking up that extra second round pick. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with Emmanuel Forbes, Mississippi State cornerback.
I'm so jealous of you, Nick. I went into this mock draft, this dueling 7-round mock draft, with the idea that I was going to most likely trade this 25th overall pick. I think if the board falls the way it did in your mock, I really hope Joe Shane does trade back because for a lot of reasons. I mean, for the fun of this exercise, now you have the 62nd pick to play with, Nick, and you could find a good player. And I think by the end of it, when you do make these trades back, your mocks always look better because like, oh, I got this guy and this guy and this guy. The real reality NFL is a lot of picks after 50 overall just bust and end up not making it. But after the draft is done, like after a mock or the actual draft is done, it looks so good on paper. So you're going to have a much more fun mock to work with. And that was my expectation. But I also think outside of that, it is a good move for the Giants to make and Joe Shane to make, regardless of, if these picks actually pan out, you're getting more throws at the board. You're getting more targets at that dartboard. And you may not hit on 62, but you may then hit on your actual natural pick at 57, but now you got two chances really to hit on one player there versus one chance. And I think if the board falls your way, Nick, with those two corners that we really like, or that I really like, because I don't want to speak for you on Porter, with Porter and Banks off the board, with Branch off the board, with Nolan Smith off the board, with, Zay Flowers off the board, maybe, then you should really think to trade back. And I hope the Giants do consider it on draft night. But in my mock draft, Nick, I got lucky here. I had a player fall. And look, some players we like went 15th overall. Joey Porter Jr. To the Packers. I like him. Brian Banch at 18 overall went to the Lions. I like him. Kalijah Cansey at 21 overall. I like him. Brian Breesy at 22 overall. Nolan Smith at 23 overall. But on my board, Nick, somehow falling to 25 overall is Deonte Banks, the corner out of Maryland. And this is a snap pick for me in this spot. Deonte Banks, I don't want to totally spoil them all, but he will be on the My Guys show. I freaking love Deonte Banks' profile. I want to get into too much of it now because we're going to talk about it on a My Guys show later, but I just feel like this is the complete profile for a corner outside of one thing, and that's somewhat questionable ability to get his head around down the field on vertical routes on the vertical plane, and ball skills not perfectly there on all, across the board, mostly on those vertical routes. But that's such a minute point of his game. Like the NFL, we just don't see a lot of vertical shots from the vast majority of quarterbacks. 90 to 95% of quarterbacks are either the get the ball out quick in the layup lane type of quarterbacks, or like they need deep shots off play action, and most offenses don't give them that. So I'm not too worried about that. Outside of that, Deonte Banks does everything for me on film. So, and has the amazing athletic profiles. This is a snap pick for me, Deonte Banks. This would be one of the most players I'm most excited about the Giants potentially getting. So I'm going to draft Deonte Banks. I'm not going to trade back. I'm going to roll the simulator forward to the second round. Nick, now you're going to be up on the clock before I am at 62 overall in round 2 because you did pick up that extra pick. So on your board, who's left at 62? Who went off that you were pissed that went off before you? Or I'm sorry, 57 comes before 62. I'm an idiot. I don't know math. So we're both on the clock again. You're going to be on the clock first, though, at 57 overall.
Yeah, I would have probably attempted to trade up if this was a real draft, because John Michael Schmitz was selected at 52. And then 2 picks later, Joe Tippmann was selected at 54. But I have this on fast mode because I have no patience, obviously. And I just want to see where my pick is. So I did not have an opportunity to jump up. Luke Whippler is still around at 57, and the center run has started. But Trenton Simpson is still around. The Clemson linebacker, Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee wide receiver, is still around, as is Cedric Tillman. So there are some really interesting players left. One reason why I was a little hesitant, even though I did it, to go cornerback in the first round is because DJ Turner and Clark Phillips, they're still around. And there are still assets that I feel like can be added to the secondary that you can select here in the second round and feel very comfortable about it. And I don't love this player, Trenton Simpson, but I do like the value of Trenton Simpson at 57. So I'm really considering that selection. I can't say I'm considering DJ Turner, even though he plays a different spot than Emmanuel Forbes. Luke Whippler, that's fine, but I don't think I'm going to go with that in the second round. And then I'm looking at Diane Henley, who's a player that we both really like. He's available at 57, a linebacker, versatile type of player. But I do believe I'm more than likely going to select Trenton Simpson with this selection and plug him in, and that will be because I do have Trenton Simpson a little bit higher from the film I've seen on Diane Henley. I believe you've seen more. I haven't watched that USC game. I really want to get to that, so I should probably do that. But in this mock, I think I'm comfortable sitting here at 57 and selecting Trenton Simpson.
I like that pick. I think there's a lot of talk about Trenton Simpson. The talk earlier was centered around if the Giants would take him at 25. But if you don't take him at 25 and he falls to 57, that makes it more of a gamble that I can get on board with. And I feel like you feel the same way, right, Nick? There is still the idea behind him. Like, number one, I think you brought this up early in the process, and we talked about this with and this podcast will drop after that, so it's fine, with Russell Brown the other day. And it's like the character there is through the roof with Trenton Simpson. And the Giants love that. And I love it too, because good character means you have a chance to maximize potential. Do you want to be the best possible football player you can be? Is the number one question for every prospect that makes a difference in them hitting or not. To me, it's more of a baseline, but it's not there for all these prospects, if we're going to be honest, which is the crazy part. Some of these guys don't really take it as seriously as others. Maybe they rely on their talent. I don't think that's the case with Trenton Simpson, despite him having a lot of talent, Nick. So I like this pick for you here. On my board, though, Nick, I don't really like what's left here, and I'm struggling because a player I'm considering is Tuipulotu out of USC, the edge. I'm okay with the pick here. Julius Brents is on the board. I like that too, but the problem with Brents is I just went Deonte Banks in round one, and the same thing goes for DJ Turner, who I'd probably push come to shove take over Julius Brents, so I like them both, but I already went corner, so I gotta rule them out. So I can't really go corner. It doesn't make too much sense, I don't think. Zach Charbonnet's on the board, but I'm not going to make that kind of luxury pick right now. Nathaniel Dell, Tank Dell is on the board. I'm strongly considering Dell. I don't really care what others think of him. I think he's a really good player, and I just have this feeling that the size won't matter as much, and he's not going to be a Tavon Austin type. So I'm considering him for sure. Also on the board here is Cedric Tillman, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, who we both like, who offers a different skill set than what the Giants currently have. I do have my concerns with Tillman with a Daniel Jones type quarterback, and with this type of Brian Dable, Mike Kafka system, but I do like what he brings that, the Giants don't have. Also on the board here is Deion Henley, who I love, but I'm not so sure I'm going to make this pick just yet. So actually, I'm looking to trade here. I'm going to make my first trade of this draft. I'm going to go from 57. Let's see if I can make this trade. So this is going to be, I'm talking with the Bengals. The Bengals are not a team that usually trades. Duke Tobin just sits at his picks and just makes his picks. But today they want to trade. So let's see what I can get back by giving them 57. I want 60 and 92. I'm going to give them 57 and 160 and 172. And let's see if they're in for that. Let's offer this trade. The trade was accepted. Okay, so I moved back from 57, 3 spots to 60. I picked up 92. I lost 160, and I lost 172. So after this trade, I'm going to resume the draft and see what's left 3 picks later. So DJ Turner and Tuipulotu come off the board. And now, Nick, I got to be honest with you, I'm thinking about moving back down again. So I'm going to go from 60 to 70, and I'm going to pick up 100 along the way. Is that all they can offer me? Is anything else better than this? Let's see.
You gotta get greedy, man. Get greedy.
I'm getting greedy. Nah, none of these teams have anything. Let's see if the Bucks have anything interesting to offer. No, nothing. This is less interesting to me. Now I can get pick 100, but I do like pick 100 enough. So I'm going to offer 60 for 70 and pick 100 with the Raiders. Let's offer this trade. And that was accepted too. So now I moved back another 10 spots, but I picked up another top 100 pick, back end of 100, but there's guys we like there. So I'm going to resume the draft now. Julius Brents, Antonio Johnson, Luke Whippler, Andre Carter, Clark Phillips, Cedric Tillman comes off the board. No, that's what I was hoping would be there for me. Okay, so now I'm at pick 70. I lost my chance at Cedric Tillman. I'm looking at the board. I'm looking at players. And you know what? So Tank Dell's on the board. I'm definitely considering him. But you know what, Nick? There's a player who's kind of really intrigued me late in this process. And I think I really like his upside here. And I think I'm going to go with him. And that's Chandler Zavala, the guard out of North Carolina State, the interior offensive lineman. Maybe he can be a center. Maybe he can be a guard. I think he's probably a guard. But I just love the more I looked into his profile, I just really like it. Coming into football late, the athleticism, the ability, the combination of power and foot speed. I like him. I'm going to go interior offensive line here. I'm going to go Chandler Zavala at 70 overall.
Hey, I can't knock that. Now, I have not really seen too much of Chandler Zavala. I guess I watched a decent amount of him from his either junior or sophomore tape just by watching Icky, because they're both North Carolina State guys. But I'm also pretty active in the general manager chair, but I already took care of that. Okay. So I traded from 62 because I had the 62nd pick. I'm trading down to 64, traded back 2 spots, allowed the Bears to double dip. They went DJ Turner, and then they were just so inclined to trade back up into the second round to get Andre Carter out of Army. Good for you, I guess. That's fine. So now I'm sitting there at 64. I picked up the 133rd pick from the Philadelphia Eagles, which was owned by the Chicago Bears. So trade down 2 spots, get another pick. Hey, I'm all about that. And Jalen Hyatt is still on the board. Nathaniel Dell is not anymore. So that would have been a really fun. Do I go Tank Dell? Do I go Jalen Hyatt? Because I really kind of like, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think I like Tank Dell better than Jalen Hyatt.
I feel like I do too.
Luckily, this PFF board removed that from me. So I'm going to go with Jalen Hyatt here. First pick in the 3rd round. I think I'm fine with that. Look, I'm not the biggest Jalen Hyatt guy, but I know the traits that he offers are traits that are insanely valuable in the NFL. And they are traits that I feel like the Giants desperately need on their offense right now. I don't love the fact that he more than likely is going to have to play in the slot. It's going to be a little bit of a transition period. I hate the idea of the Giants selecting him at 25, but here at 64, I am okay with it. So I'm going to go with Jalen Hyatt. If Michael Wilson didn't have all those injury issues, I would probably consider that totally, completely different player than a Jalen Hyatt, but I'm going to go with Hyatt here.
So let's go over your first 3 picks real quick. Just remind the listeners of those first 3 picks, and I'll remind of my first 2 before I get into my 3rd pick.
Yeah, so in the first round, I went with Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback out of Mississippi State. In the second round, I went with Trenton Simpson, linebacker out of Clemson. And then with my 3rd round pick, first pick in the 3rd round, I went with Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver out of Tennessee.
Okay, so you had some speed to our offense, which we don't have. You had 2 big pieces to our defense, both speed guys as well. Even Trenton Simpson for what he plays, a speed guy, and finally some weapons for Wink Martindale. So far, I have given Martindale a potential cornerback 1. I think maybe he'll be more of an actual cornerback 2 at the next level, but like a super high-end cornerback 2 in Deontay Banks. And then Chandler Zavala to upgrade our interior offensive line, compete year 1 maybe at center. If they want to work him there, maybe at right guard, the future there. We'll see what happens with Azudu, but at worst, he's competition. So now I'm on the clock at 89. I got to be honest, Nick, there's a lot of talent I like on the board here for me at 89. So I'm going to go over what my process. I'm not trading out of this pick because I liked way too many of the players who are left. Players I'm considering are 1, Tajay Spears, the running back out of Tulane, who we've done draft profile on. We both love him. Nick talked about him on his players he's higher on the consensus. I think he'd add an element to this Giants offense immediately. Another player who I'm considering here who fell in this mock, and I don't think he's going to fall this late, Nick, and he's probably best player available, is Jartavius Martin, the corner / safety / whatever you want to play him at. We don't know yet, out of Illinois. And I love the fact that if I draft Martin here with Banks, I have 2 guys immediately who can compete for different spots in the secondary. I can put Martin in the slot, or potentially out safe, just mix them around with Wink Martindale. And we know we're going to have Banks on the outside, but I can't say I'm definitely making this pick just yet, because as I look down this board, I see a lot of players I like. I don't want to give away too much of my guys on this pod, but I feel like I'm going to. It's just kind of the nature of a mock draft. And I guess I'm giving it away, but Tyler Scott is on the board, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati. And I don't know how much you've watched of Scott, but I freaking love Tyler Scott's game, man. I think like you talked before about you might take Dell over Hyatt. I might take Tyler Scott over Jalen Hyatt, man. I think he's the better. I almost feel like he's the more complete version of Jalen Hyatt. I like the way he gets in and out of breaks. I think he has a little bit of Tyler. I've heard this comp, so it's not my own, but I think he does have a little bit of Tyler Lockett to his game. And I love Tyler Lockett's film. I knew he'd be a steal in round 3. It was so freaking obvious. He fell only because of size. His film was filthy in college. So he's not quite at that level at getting in and out of breaks as Tyler Lockett. He's not the same kind of route runner, but he is a faster player overall than Lockett, which I think matters. One stat I heard from Dane Brugler on Tyler Scott that I think is just so awesome. All of his touchdowns, and I think it's like 12 over the last 2 years, or maybe it was just 1 year. I think it was 2 years. And I don't know if the number's 12, but all of his touchdowns were 20 plus yards. It's just a crazy stat to hear with a wide receiver. It just shows what he can offer to the Giants offense, an explosiveness they don't have. So he's in consideration for me. I'm scrolling down the draft board. There's other guys I like, but right now I'm going to narrow it down to Jartavius Martin or Tyler Scott here. 2 players I really like. And I just think overall, I said Tajay Spears, but he's not going to be the guy for me here. And Darius Rush is in the mix too, but I'm not as big of a Rush fan as maybe some others are. I think it's more just tools that are just a little bit overrated just based on the testing. I think I got to go Martin here based on value, though, Nick, and I'm adding a second piece to my secondary. I know some people are like, well, we already have Adoree Jackson and Cordell Flott and Aaron Robinson. Everything there is open-ended. Cordell Flott might not evolve into the player we hope he is. And even if he does, now we have 3 good corners. Adoree Jackson might not be here for long, to be honest, given the contract situation, his age and injury history. And then Aaron Robinson, to me, we just have to look at that, Nick. I feel like it's a total, like, if it happens, great, but that's it, because now he's had an injured season. He's coming back from injury. Doesn't have, in my opinion, any like long extended great film for the Giants. Has spurts of good film, but not anything extended that you can bank on. So I'm going Jartavius Martin here at 89 overall.
Jartavius Martin, hey, that's one of my favorite players in this draft class in terms of just where he is valued. I'll say this about Tyler Scott, though, just because I like to add just thoughts on players into this.
Yeah, I love that.
I really like Tyler Scott, but it's obvious that this dude did not play wide receiver that much at all until he got to college. Like, he was a running back in college, went to Cincinnati, or back in high school.
Option running. I think he was an option quarterback too at first.
Yeah. So I found him very frustrating in terms of adjusting to footballs that were away from his frame, like much worse than a Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah.
In terms of if the ball is not precise, if it's not right where it needs to be, this guy can't adjust to it. And that was something that was
a great point.
Kind of upsetting. But in terms of where he's being valued, I love the idea of adding a player like that to the Giants, because that acceleration, that burst, I think you brought this up on a previous podcast. He does, and obviously Dan and me, we're not saying that he's Odell Beckham Jr., but he has that, hey, if I win inside on a slant,
I could be gone.
He has. We saw that against ECU, man. He caught a slant against ECU, and he just made 3 angles disappear.
Yeah.
He has that type of burst and acceleration. So I love adding him around this area of the draft. But in terms of being a complete wide receiver, there's still a lot of work, in my opinion, for him.
Fair. Good point. I also wonder, though, I'll ask you this now that we're on the conversation, because I'm back on the clock at 92. Remember, I picked up some extra picks from trading back.
I'm at 95, so because I traded down from 89, just to update on the mock draft. Traded down from 89 to 95, picked up selection 122 as well. So I traded down again. So you can make this next pick if you want, since I'm after you in the order.
I will. And the picks after Jartavius Martin were A.T. Perry and Tajay Spears. So obviously, if you just listen to the last breakdown, you know where I'm going here. And it's going to be wide receiver Tyler Scott, who we just discussed. But my one more thing on Scott that I want to bring up before I make this pick is, do you think at all, in your opinion, the fact that he has played so little wide receiver and he came from a option quarterback and he was a running back for the rest of his high school career, then converted, do you think that actually almost makes you more intrigued by his profile because there's more meat on the bone, right? Like the idea of like, he's not maxed out at all as far as playing actual receiver. And if he gets good coaching, he could potentially be an even different player than what we saw on his college film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not a lot of experience, not a lot of snaps there. And this was also a third-year junior who came out. He's not like a senior. He didn't have that much experience. I think he played a decent amount at 30 catches for 520 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 drops in 2021. And then in 2022, when Desmond Ridder wasn't there and the quarterback situation was much worse, 54 catches for 899 yards, 9 touchdowns. And that could have been so much more too. Like going through Tyler Scott's film, Dan, you saw him be open and the football just not be delivered to him. And you're like, oh man, if the quarterback was Desmond Ridder, like it was in the previous season, Tyler Scott would have had a lot more than 899 yards and a lot more than just 9 touchdowns. This is a true deep threat, average 16 and a half yards per catch. And like you said, the stat that Brugler had, where I think every single one of his touchdowns were over 20 yards or whatever.
Yards,
like
explosive plays.
Hey, that area of the draft, I'm fully for him to be added to the New York Giants. And
explosives. You know that?
Yeah, or you could just do
oh yeah, pino, explosive. All right, dude, get out of my face, you weirdo.
Did you see Rondell Moore too? Rondell Moore was like, what the?
Yeah, it's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Like, yeah, man, cool. We got a good explosive play. That's not Nick Sirianni, the other dude, Gannon, who went over to Arizona. It's a little clip that you might have seen online of him just talking to his players when he first got there. But yeah, I think you brought up some great points there. And the other thing with Tyler Scott to me is, he has that, and you brought this up, but I just want to reiterate, because I felt like I was the same with Zay Flowers. There were so many examples on film with Flowers where he was just open on the vertical plane and the ball just didn't come there. Either he got sacked, the BC quarterback, or he just didn't see it. Now, that was an issue for the Giants last year, and a lot of times, we're going to be honest, there were times where receivers were open on the vertical plane and the quarterback didn't get the ball there. But the hope is, over time, Jones learns the system even better, becomes more comfortable in it, and again, remember, Brian Dable and Mike Kafka and Shea Tierney, they're building him in their mind from scratch. Like, that's what happened last year. They restarted Jones's whole thought process post-snap from scratch. And there's a chance that he can evolve that thought process to a different point than we've seen over his first 4 years. That's the hope with a player like Daniel Jones. So I hope at some point he gets to the point where he's seeing it, it's clicking fast. And when a guy like Tyler Scott, who I'm about to draft at 92 overall, is open, the ball's coming there. So Tyler Scott is my pick at 92 overall. Just to recap the picks right now, before you make your last pick, I'll recap mine, then you recap yours. I had first round Deonte Banks fell to 25, so I snapped him up there. Then Chandler Zavala after 2 trade backs in round 2, the interior offensive lineman out of NC State. In round 3, Jartavius Martin, the safety / corner defensive back at Illinois, was still there. Nick and I both like him a lot. I think he's the second best safety prospect in this class. So I took him, and then I added speed to my offense with a receiver who I really like in Tyler Scott. So now I have 2 defensive backs, an interior offensive lineman, and a receiver with my first 4 picks. Nick, go over your first 4 picks, and then get to your next pick.
Yeah, Dan. So I never made my 4th pick. It was just Emmanuel Forbes, Trenton Simpson, and Jalen Hyatt. And then I traded back a couple times, got a couple 4th round picks, and now I'm sitting here at 95. Darius Rush, Tyler Steen, Zach Pickens with the last 3 picks off the board. I probably wouldn't have selected any of them. I would have thought about Steen, but I'm not a big Pickens guy, and Rush, not the crap on South Carolina football, but I felt like he was much more traits than anything else. I did his film before the Senior Bowl, and then I saw him getting like, oh man, this guy could move up in the first round with, good testing. He had a great Senior Bowl. And I was like, I don't necessarily see that, but to each his own. So now I'm sitting here at 95. I want to address the defensive line. I want to address the interior offensive line. I address wide receiver. I address linebacker. I address cornerback. I still think you could add secondary pieces. I don't love the board right now. You have Isaiah McGuire, who is like a big 4-3 even front end, who is big physical, can power rush you. I know he I've heard on podcasts people mention that he did a very good job against Broderick Jones against Georgia. I have not seen that film yet, but I trust the people who said as much, but I'm not going to go in that direction. Chandler Zavala is still around. I haven't done extensive research on Chandler Zavala. I know he's a freak athlete, and I know that he has positional versatility in the sense that he could possibly play center. That's at least what people are saying. I'm not completely sure. Don't love this setup. Also have Tank Bigsby, and I'm looking at running backs, but then I look down the list, bro. Plenty of running backs that I really like still available. So I can probably wait on that. Dorian Williams is available. Corey Trice is available. I think that's a little early for those players. Riley Moss. And this is kind of, you can even have this conversation, dude. Like the wide receiver and the cornerbacks, it's a little bit deep. Like there are wide receivers and cornerbacks that are available right now whom I like and who I think can offer the Giants something that they don't necessarily have. But I'm going to go with interior defensive lineman here out of LSU, Jaquelin Roy. Now, this is a player who he's not always the most consistent. I don't know if there's any character issues. I haven't heard of anything like that, but I know that I feel like his motor, when I was watching this film, ran a little bit hot and cold, but when he flashed, like the flashes were very, very bright, and he had power and he had nimble feet for a bigger individual. He's like 305 pounds. So he's not massive, about 6'3", 305 pounds with just under 33-inch arms. When he flashed, he freaking flashed. And I think him in a bit role behind Dexter Lawrence, behind Leonard Williams can add depth to that defensive line. Doesn't have to start right away, but would be a significant upgrade over the DJ Davidsons of the world. And I feel like if you get him with Andre Patterson, you can maybe hone in on those really bright flashes and allow him to kind of use his hands and his power to work to the half man to create a little bit of interior pressure, but also just be a sound run defender. Because he's more than just, I'm a run 2-down run stuffer. He can also add a little element to your pass rush. So I'm going to go with Jaquelin Roy out of LSU.
I like that pick. And I think when I'm on the clock here, I've obviously gotten to the point here where I don't have any of my big linebackers that I'm interested left. I've been looking to get into linebacker here. Henley's gone, who I love, and obviously the 3 who are ranked ahead of him are way gone here. I haven't addressed interior defensive line yet, Nick, or edge in my draft. Remember, I just have Deonte Banks, Jartavius Martin, 2 defensive backs, interior offensive lineman Zavala, and Tyler Scott. So I'm definitely considering I need to find some either edge or interior defensive lineman here that I like. If we're going on need, I don't like to draft on need, but I'd like to match need with value. That's what you should always be looking to do in a draft. There are so many running backs here who are on top of my board right now. And I'm just like, do I take one, Nick? Because like you said, if I don't, there's going to be other guys I love who are just always available in this draft. And I know at most the Giants will take 1 running back in this class if we're lucky. But man, Tank Bigsby sitting on the board here at 100 overall. I just think he's better than the 100th best player by far to me. I love Tank Bigsby. To me, like he's been slept on in this draft process, and I think he's a really freaking complete back. And his burst for that, to have that size profile and that strength in his lower half and that burst, it's special to me. But I don't think I can go with him right now, given what we discussed. There are players who I would consider here, but I've made the decision actually. And it's funny because this pick I have 100 overall right now was originally the Giants pick that they had that they traded for Darren Waller. I got it back by trading back earlier with the Raiders. They gave it back to me. And now I'm trading it again. So this will be the third time this pick was moved. I'm moving from 100 back to 107. And I'm also including 128, 209, 240, 243, and 254 to acquire 107, 117, 135, and 210. So I'm really concentrating my draft here. I'm turning this into an 8-player draft, but it's all in a range of players that I like instead of kind of that later round range. So I'm going to offer this trade. It looks likely to be accepted, and it was accepted. So I moved back to 107. There is one player I'm hoping will fall, and let's see if he does. And he did. And that was Dorian Williams, the linebacker out of Tulane. So at 107 overall, I take Dorian Williams. I love the arm length. I love the speed and potential to match and coverage. And it's finally the time where we get ourselves one of these around pick 100 athletic linebackers that we've been talking about drafting, Nick, for the last 3 drafts we've done this, or however long we've been doing draft prep for Big Blue Banter. We've wanted these dudes. We wanted Logan Wilson. We wanted Davis Gaither. But there's plenty on this list. We finally got one, an athletic linebacker who could potentially help the Giants in pass coverage, something they haven't had really since Michael Boley. It's time to upgrade that idea, that type of player. Hopefully Dorian Williams can become this type of player. We're going to make the pick here at 107 overall. And I think you're back on the clock with your next pick.
I am back on the clock, and I'm going to go with at pick 122. And I also have pick 128 and pick 133. So I kind of stacked up a lot of picks. And I would be completely fine if the Giants do that. I get a lot of these 4th round picks. I feel like there is a lot of value here.
Yep.
But there's one player. He won the Outland Trophy. He won the Remington Award. Very accomplished. Was at North, I believe he was at Virginia. And he started somewhere else. It might have been the Air Force Academy. Went to Virginia. And then he ended up going to Michigan and playing his senior year at Michigan. And that is Olusegun Oluwatimi, the center. Now, he's a very accomplished player. I didn't feel like he had the same type of range as some of the other centers in this class that we are talking about. I think he is a highly intelligent player, although one of my biggest gripes about him, and I think this was also just an issue with Michigan's offensive line, not necessarily an indictment on Oluwatimi, was a lot of the pressures that he did surrender last year were through twists. But watching him, knowing that he is somebody who helps set the protection, knowing that he sets that offense up, I appreciated his intelligence through that standpoint. But it did seem like twists were just an issue for the interior offensive line in general, which is something that I think you have to know. I don't think he's as quick up to the second level as some of these other guys, but if you do need a player who can be a functional starter, won't be a player that is going to hurt you, won't be a vulnerability. I think Oluwatimi here in the 4th round is a solid option to bring in and have compete for the center spot with Hassanauer, I believe is how you pronounce it. And I would hope that Oluwatimi would win that job.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. And I think we've had some draft analysts on recently who liked him. I think it's interesting. I watched him a little bit and I watched Scruggs a little bit just to get an idea of these types of back end guys and Stromberg. I feel like he was kind of the one I liked the least of those 3. Scruggs, I was surprised. Maybe I saw some good stuff from him and he wasn't as good elsewhere, but I kind of like Drew Scruggs here. Though I don't know if his game, it's another guy is like anytime I'm talking back end centers, Nick, if you're not talking the 1st round talent type centers, to me, I think there's just a decent chance these guys end up being nothing at the NFL level. Like potentially not even starters, potentially not even guys you can put in a pinch. Like they're just, the center is a tough position in my opinion to translate. And I don't really think the stats tell too much. Like it's very easy for a center to not give up a lot of pressures and sacks because that's just the nature of the position. So we see a lot of that. And some of the guys the Giants have even claimed over the years as UDFAs were like, oh my God, have you seen his PFF stats? This guy could be a smash hit for the Giants. And they're like, who was the kid they took a couple years ago that we got a little excited about from a small school that had like great PFF grades? Forgetting the name now.
Who are you talking? Who's
the Giants claimed him a couple years ago, maybe 2 summers ago or the summer before that. Evan Brown, I think was his name. Remember him?
Evan Brown.
Yeah. Great PFF grades. Oh my God, let's hype him up. And just absolutely nothing when you translate to actual NFL interior defensive linemen, because everyone has arm length at the NFL level. Everyone has size. Everyone has skill, and that you're not facing bad competition anymore. So I'm going to pass here at center. There's some guys I like, but I have my eye on a center later in this draft who I'm going to take most likely a little ahead of consensus because I like him a lot. So instead, I'm looking at top available players here for me at 117 overall. Luke Schoonmaker is staring me right in the eye, and I love this dude. So I'm definitely considering him here. But there's also a lot of running backs I like on the board. Kendry Miller from TCU, a player who the Giants have brought in for a top 30 visit, who I think reminds me in some ways of Aaron Jones coming out of the NFL, who everyone said, Jones fell to around this range. I don't remember where Aaron Jones went, but I think it was round 4, Nick, if I
believe so,
remember
yeah.
correctly. Yeah. And this is where we're at right now in round 4. So Kendry Miller, someone I'm considering. Sean Tucker, a lot of people like the running back out of Syracuse. I finally watched him a little bit, Nick. I like him, but I like him for a Shanahan system. I don't like him for the Giant system. If I'm drafting Sean Tucker, I am going to be a Shanahan team that's one cut and go, because this guy, to me, has no wiggle to his game. He's got great straight line. Just see it, dart it, shoot your body in. He's speedy. He's powerful. He runs low. I love that style for a certain kind of offense, not ours. So I'm not going to take him. Ivan Pace is still on the board. Deuce Vaughn is still on the board. Roshan Johnson, all players I love. And it's tough here, but I'm looking at a lot of good running backs, and I almost want to kind of wait to 135 here because maybe then I can get a running back too, and here I can get someone like Luke Schoonmaker. And so you know what, Nick? Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to draft Luke Schoonmaker here, the tight end out of Michigan. Giants don't really need a tight end, but man, I like this kid a lot, this prospect. First of all, I feel like he reminds me a lot of Daniel Bellinger coming out of last year, only he's a lot older, but actually tested out a lot more athletically than Bellinger, who also had good athletic testing. Schoonmaker to me is someone who, I've said this before with some other tight ends over the years. I said it with Michael Mayer this year. If they actually used him as a receiver, I think he would have been a very productive receiver for Michigan. But they didn't give him the ball a lot in the passing game. And that's partially their quarterback issues, though they've improved that with McCarthy, but also just that style of offense and the style of offense they run. It doesn't really feature the tight end in the passing game. Schoonmaker, I like him as a blocker already. I like his athletic profile, and I like his upside as a receiver that hasn't been tapped into yet. We bring him into the Giants here. I know we're crowded at tight end, but 3 tight ends is good to have, and depth is good to have at this position as well. And there's even going to be, in my opinion, some scenarios, Nick, this year where we have both Schoonmaker and Daniel Bellinger in the field, and maybe no Darren Waller, or we have all 3 on the field, and Darren Waller's lined up in the backside as an X receiver or just on the outside anywhere as a boundary guy. And that's fine. And we use one of those guys in the backfield. We've already seen it with Bellinger. He'll be moved into the H-back position. You have Schoonmaker on the end of the line of scrimmage. So I'm taking Luke Schoonmaker here as my 6th pick in this draft.
Yeah, and I'm on my 6th pick as well. I am at pick 128. I also have a selection at pick 133. And I scrolled down a bit, went to page 2, page 3 to look for players. And there are some players there that I could select here that I think I would be happy with. One being Purdue's Charlie Jones. But I'm going to try to get greedy here and realize that this is a stupid draft simulator that we're using, and it's not going to overdraft somebody like that. It's not going to scroll that far to find a player that I might value. So I'm going to stay at least somewhat within the realm of the confines of their stupid rankings. And we're going to do that. And I actually like this player. And I'm going to go cornerback, outside cornerback, Caillou Blue Kelly from Stanford. Another player who was very long, went down to the Senior Bowl, had a solid outing out there. But when you turn on his tape, he's also one, maybe not the best at locating the football when it's in the air, but can play man coverage, can play zone coverage, cerebral player, smart player, isn't going to be a liability in run support. And at this juncture of the draft, talk about 4th round, I think you could find 2 starters, possibly 2 starters long-term with Emmanuel Forbes, who I got in the 1st round, and Caillou Blue Kelly, who fell all the way to this point of the draft. So I am going to go in that direction. It's like Caillou Blue Kelly out of Stanford.
I like that pick a lot. Now you got another corner to put into the mix for you there. And so we can really start to double down on a position that I think you should double down on. Now I'm back on the clock here at 135 overall. And I got to say, Nick, it kind of sucks. I got greedy a little bit with that Schoonmaker pick, even though I love him. And somehow, some way, a slew of running backs just fell off the board. I lost Roshan Johnson. I lost Kendry Miller, who I love. I lost, I don't like Zach Evans, but he came off the board. Sean Tucker came off the board if we wanted to try to move him into that system. Dwayne McBride came off the board, running back I also like, who, we haven't talked about at all, and he really won't have much of a receiving profile at the next level, dude. But you want to talk about one of the actual best runners, pure runners in this class, I think Dwayne McBride could be up there. So I don't like what happened here, though I do see one running back I love here, Nick, but he's so small. It's Deuce Vaughn. Man, I love Deuce Vaughn. I don't care how small he is. I think it almost helps him get through. Keaton Mitchell's on the board. He would add speed to the Giants, but we already got that with Tyler Scott. But you can never have too much speed. Chase Brown has not gotten any hype, the running back at Illinois, but he's really good. He is really, really good and has a really good athletic testing profile. So I like Chase Brown here, still on the board. Your boy's still on the board here, the center out of Michigan here, and I haven't gone center yet.
I don't know if he's my boy.
No, sorry, not your boy. Just someone you already took in this draft, in your mock draft. Definitely not your boy. So far I have Deonte Banks, corner, Chandler Zavala, interior offensive lineman, Tavius Martin, center. Safety / corner, Tyler Scott, wide receiver, Dorian Williams, linebacker, Luke Schoonmaker, tight end. So I can do anything here, but I'm going to take the chance here of the guy I really want here at this pick falling to 210. And I'm going to add Deuce Vaughn here, the running back out of Kansas State. Look, there's a lot of running backs I would consider at this pick. I just went over them. But Deuce Vaughn, I really like his game. I don't care about his size. He's been tearing up to college football since he first arrived. I think his size in some ways works to his favor because he can, in like a Darren Sproles way, because, he can get lost in the backfield. He runs with such good pad level. I just like what he could potentially add to this offense. I'm going to go Deuce Vaughn here at 135 overall.
I like the idea of adding a player like Deuce Vaughn. I do. And I'm sitting here now at pick 133, and I also want to go running back because I enjoy the running backs who are available. And the running backs that are available, it's Kansas State's Deuce Vaughn. Texas is Roschon Johnson, Chase Brown from Illinois, Eric Gray from Oklahoma, who I like, Israel Abanikanda from Pittsburgh, who I also like, and then Keaton Mitchell from ECU. And those are the top running backs who are available. Also, Kenny McIntosh from Georgia, who I also like as a receiving threat out of the backfield. And this is where I think we could have an honest conversation, Dan, about the Giants running back situation.
Okay.
I'm thinking about going with Texas running back Roschon Johnson right now. And I feel like he is a good 1-2 punch, a nice compliment to Saquon Barkley, but also he doesn't have that jitterbug electric type of ability of a Keaton Mitchell or an Israel Abanikanda. Abanikanda might be he might be the fastest running back in this class. Everyone's like Devin Achane. I get that. But there are plays where Abanikanda is just like insanely quick. It's just, a feather can bring the guy down. With the Giants, I do believe somebody who complements Saquon Barkley perfectly would be a player like an Abanikanda, would be a player like a Keaton Mitchell. But how long is Saquon Barkley going to be here? The owner is coming out and he's saying, we like Saquon Barkley, we want Saquon Barkley here. I don't know if that's going to be the case. And I feel like Roschon Johnson might be that player who, if Saquon Barkley is not a Giant next year, it's like, okay, Roschon Johnson, it's your time. And he could slide in as a starter and be that starter for at least year one until maybe he proves himself not to be capable to be a full-time, quote unquote, type of back. He could be the 1A in a committee, though. So I could go with the fast guy, or I could go with the more sturdy, just good overall running back who was a backup in college because his teammate was Bijan Robinson. And I think I'm going to go with Roschon Johnson, who I just appreciate his skill set a little bit more than these guys who are just kind of really, really fast. So I'm going to go with Roschon Johnson at Texas.
I like that pick. I think you're taking the best overall running back. If he was on the board, I would have taken him over Deuce Vaughn for sure. I think one of the interesting things about the Saquon Barkley conversation that hasn't really been discussed that much, not just by us, by anyone, is even if they do what we think, or I think they're going to do ultimately, which is re-sign him to a multi-year deal, that deal is still probably only going to be 3 years, right? Or at least probably only 2 years of guaranteed money, first of all, because he only gave 2 years guaranteed to Daniel Jones. I would highly doubt Joe Shane's giving more guaranteed money to a running back. That's one. And then two is, even if they did do more money guarantee, longer contract, or even if it's 3 years, it's a running back, right? Like, no matter what you're hoping will happen, there's a decent chance that he gets injured or falls off in production due to injuries, and you eventually get to the point where you are looking for a new running back. So I don't mind taking a Roschon Johnson here with the idea that he will eventually be your 1A and your early down pounder as soon as potentially 2 years from now, even if they do re-sign Barkley, or let's say 3 years from now if they re-sign Barkley, or 2. You never know with injuries here. The dude's already torn his ACL and MCL, I believe, at the same time. Has also dealt with other injuries throughout his career. He's a running back, remember. Just came off a massive workload. The Giants pounded him into the ground last year. And not only pounded him into the ground in the run game, they also, don't give me that look when you're the one who always does the porn star length thing. And then not only that, okay, and then not only that, they gave him all those like flare routes where they just threw it to him in the flat, Barkley, and he's taking a hit on all those plays as well, sometimes low hits. So, and they're going to do that again this year a bunch. So, yeah, I like the pick a lot, and I'm okay with it. Are you? I think you might be up next because I've made so many trades that my final pick is actually 210. Are you in between anywhere at 210?
I am. I actually
Okay.
have pick 160 is where I pick next. So I am thinking about trading this pick back 5 picks with the New Orleans Saints, picking up 227 and then just giving them 160. And then I have another 7th round pick. I'm going to do that for more kicks at the can. So I'm just going to trade back 5 spots. Sweet. I'm going to resume the draft and then we're going to jump right back into this. All right. So in doing that, Charlie Jones was selected. So that's why you don't trade back, ladies and gentlemen. But you know what? Everyone on this podcast knows that like we love Charlie Jones.
Yeah.
So I'm also okay with going with another player and then giving a little synopsis on another player that we also like, who we might not have talked about as frequently. So I have 2 cornerbacks selected, a linebacker, a wide receiver, a defensive lineman, a running back, and a center. So I've kind of run the gamut of selecting positions that the Giants need. I haven't gotten a safety yet, which is on my mind, but the safeties kind of suck in this draft class. And there's some developmental offensive linemen who I do appreciate here. There are some tight ends like Payne Durham, who's also still around, who could be your tight end 3. And I feel like a damn solid one too. You know, somebody who we talked about a little bit with our buddy Russ. But if I'm going to go in this draft right now, I'm looking at Bryce Ford Wheaton, the West Virginia wide receiver, but I already got Jalen Hyatt. I don't want to say they're the same exact type of player because they're not, but more speed predicated type of wide receivers. I could go with Jalen Redmond, the big defensive lineman out of Oklahoma, or I could select Mr. Payne Durham, tight end out of Purdue, here at pick 165. And I'm going to go in that direction. We don't know how long this Darren Waller experiment is going to last. We know the tight end position is one that can be injured. We know Darren Waller has had some injury issues. And I think behind Daniel Bellinger, you don't really have a reliable option. I like Chris Myrick. He's fine, right? I'm not a big Tommy Sweeney guy. Giants brought him in. Lawrence Cager is essentially a glorified wide receiver. So you bring this player in, and I feel like your 13 personnel package actually has some blocking to it. Might not be the most sexy athletic in terms of Payne Durham being that third tight end, but he's reliable. You get the football in his hands. He can make people miss just off of knowing positions and angles and things like that, not through athletic ability because he's not the best athlete. But I'm going to go with Payne Durham here.
I like that pick a lot. I think we talked about a little bit about Durham with Russell Brown, just somebody who flashed to us when watching Charlie Jones, and that happens sometimes. Like with this next pick, my final pick. Are you on the board before 210? Because that's my final pick.
No, I have 227, 243, and 254.
Okay. So Nick's going to have a lot of picks to close this thing out. I only have one more due to some trade ups I made after my trade backs, which I'm personally okay with. The Giants already have a lot of guys I like on our roster currently. I don't know that if we have these like 10 to 12 to 11 person like drafts, we're going to even have room on the roster to fit a lot of these dudes. I think a lot of them will get cut. But just something to bring up, a player who I'd actually consider here at 210 for me. Is Elijah Higgins. He's a wide receiver from Stanford who just caught my attention when watching Michael Wilson. That sometimes happens. Like you'll watch one team to look for one receiver, and then you'll see on the other side of the field or lined up next to him sometimes, this is another guy flashing. Who's this guy? And you're like, I'm kind of intrigued by this guy. And then you're like, oh wow, this dude has got some chops. So Elijah Higgins is a big sleeper for me in this draft, that wide receiver. A lot of people, there hasn't been much talk about him or anything like that, and it would have to be in the 200s range for sure. But just a player I'm considering. He's not going to be the player I'm taking here, though, at 210, because the player I wanted did fall to me. I got very lucky here because I think some teams might take him a little earlier. And that's Utah offensive lineman Braden Daniels, who I just tweeted about yesterday, a player who I kind of discovered later in the process. He played tackle for Utah, but I think for me, he's going to play center. For the Giants, we're going to immediately convert him to center, where I think will be his best position by far at the NFL. The movement skills for him are super rare, and they were backed up by the athletic testing. You could just see it with this dude. He explodes, gets out into space, and that's what I want for my interior offensive lineman. I want movement skills. I feel like I got 2 interior offensive linemen now in this draft between Chandler Zavala and Braden Daniels who can move and fit our system and who have better pop on the move than you would expect for these players. And both of them, I think, have a profile they can grow into. They can become much better players at the NFL level than they were at the collegiate level. Obviously, you're relying a lot on Bobby Johnson here, or whoever is eventually. I mean, hopefully he'll keep the job, but whoever is the Giants offensive line coach, you're relying a lot on them. And for now, it's Bobby Johnson. But I'm okay with that. That's part of the process for me in the projection. So with my final pick here at 210, I am going with Braden Daniels, the interior. I'm going to move him to center, but he's right, whatever you want to call him, the offensive lineman out of Utah.
Braden Daniels, yeah. And you've been telling me about him, and I need to kind of, I guess, get to Utah's offensive tape to see him. But he was a tackle, if I'm not mistaken. I believe you probably
Yep.
already brought that up. And you can kick him inside, and you have another developmental player who could possibly be the replacement for Mark Lewinsky. So now I'm sitting here, bro. I got 3 picks in the 7th round. So with my first pick in the 7th round, I'm going to go with defensive back out of Pitt, Brandon Hill. I believe the Giants met with this player at either his pro day or it was at the combine. And he's just one of those feisty types of players who can play man coverage, had a lot of missed tackles, which you don't love, kind of flies into the tackle point with reckless abandon, has that kind of feel to him on his tape. But I remember there was a play against Miami where it really just showed that this guy has really good eye discipline. I even watched some of his junior tape, and this kind of checked out too in terms of his spatial awareness and zone coverage. The play against Miami was a 2-point conversion where he was just kind of sitting there playing the robber, just kind of looking. He had a post coming in behind him, and then he had like a drag route coming in front of him, and he was just kind of looking through the routes and just right at what the quarterback was doing. The quarterback went to go throw the dig, and he just understood where exactly to go, had the discipline, had the patience, baited it, and then just jumped it and then knocked the ball down. And I just appreciate how feisty and how he kind of sticks into the hip pocket of these tight ends and the players that he does cover. Like, does he have nickel ability? I think he can. He was mostly deep half. He played a little bit of post safety over there for the Pitt Panthers. So I'm going to go with Brandon Hill with my first 2nd round pick. Adding a safety is something that I feel like the Giants definitely need. And now I have to wait a couple picks because I pick at 243, and we're seeing a bunch of guys go off the board. Jake Bobo, D. Winters, that was going to be one of my picks. He's the TCU linebacker that we were talking to. Andre Yoshivas just went off the board, and then DeMarco Helms from Alabama. And then at pick 243, Dan, I'm going to go with Duke linebacker Shaka Hayward. This is somebody who started 4 years at Duke. We know the Giants love to add these Duke Blue Devils. They have, 4 on the roster right now. This will be the 5th player that they're going to bring in. He's a player who is, I would say, not the most fluid from the little amount of Duke tape that I have watched, but he does have about 34-inch arms. Again, I do feel like that is valuable. I think that's valuable for any NFL team. And as we've seen from the New York Giants, they put a priority on that just by bringing in somebody like Bobby Okereke. Ran a 4.53 with a 31-inch vert, which you do not love. His 3-cone was also not great. That kind of speaks to, I guess, the stiffness that I saw on tape because I didn't even know that. But he did bench 22 reps of 225. And I think he could just be one of those special teams assets that you can kind of put in there in a pinch. And again, this is a 7th round draft pick right here. So I'm going to go with Shaka Hayward, just a very experienced player. And I know experience is something that the New York Giants might value. They didn't really value it too much, though, in last year's draft. But as Bill Parcells says, experience is one of the best things that you can have in a prospect coming in, even though that was more so in reference to quarterback, which is where I am going to go with my final pick if this player is still around, and that is Tyson Bagent, Division II quarterback. So I'm going to select Mr. Tyson Bagent out of Shepherd University, and I think this is a player who was at the Senior Bowl. From what I saw, comported himself well for a Division II type of player. Developmental guy, has a lot of athletic traits, which I think is important for Daniel Jones's backup. More than likely won't dress in year 1, but still a player that I think the Giants could develop just because he seemed to have a good arm and have the athletic traits that I'm looking for in somebody to back up Daniel Jones. And I kind of wanted to go with a quarterback, and there weren't really many left. Max Duggan was on the screen. I'm not the biggest Max Duggan guy, and I just like I like the fact that Tyler Bagent's father embarrassed himself on national television by talking about how strong he was and how he was a what do you call himself, like muscle man or something like that.
I don't know the story.
It was at the combine. It was a really awkward type of interview, but I didn't watch Tyson Bagent's Shepherd film. I'm not gonna sit here and lie, but just how he handled himself at the Senior Bowl was something that I respected.
I like it. And just to talk about something you mentioned earlier, Giants have 4 Duke players on their roster going into this draft. You gave them a 5th. I'm not even sure there's 5 Duke players on total around the NFL outside of the Giants roster, like 5 more. And I don't know that for a fact, obviously. There might be some, but it's pretty odd how many Duke players the Giants have. All right, let's wrap this thing up by going through the process, and you can look to the next page and PFF will grade the mock draft for you. So while you're going through it, I'll do it first. I'll tell you an idea of what I'm doing here. Remind the listeners of each pick, give the grade they gave you for each pick, and then also the overall grade that PFF gave you. So I'm going to start with my mock draft. And then after that, I want you to discuss your regrets of this draft or things you liked, both of those things, Nick. So I'll do it first. We're going to start with my first pick at 25 overall. I wanted to trade back going into this draft, but Deontay Banks out of Maryland fell the corner, and so I snapped him up. I rushed that pick to the podium, Saquon Barkley style, like Dave Gettleman did back in 2018. The only reason I waited for the 5-minute mark is because the NFL forced me to, just like Dave said, in one of the most arrogant things I've heard ever. He was just so sure that was the best pick to be made there. Don't even consider calling trade. What are you, crazy? I got the greatest player in this draft in Saquon Barkley. Positional value. I saw Jonathan Stewart last year on film in Carolina, and he didn't lose a step. And then they signed Jonathan Stewart, who then didn't play much for the Giants. All right, I'm done with that. I need to get that in. It's been a while since
Permanent residence.
It's been a while since I did a little Dave bashing, so time to return. Deontay Banks, they gave me an A for that pick. Then in round 2, I traded my 57th overall pick, 160 and 172 for 60 and 92. They gave this trade a C+, Nick. F them. I moved back 3 spots and I picked up a top 100 pick, and all I lost was 160 and 172 to move back 3 spots and get an extra top 100. That's an A for me. I don't care what they say. Then they gave me a D on my Chandler Zavala pick at guard at 70. And I get it. It might seem a little high for him there, but from what I've seen, the little I've seen, those movement skills and that profile of just kind of learning that position. And I just love that ball clay you can mold him into potentially. And I just think he could be a really good interior player for the Giants. They gave me a D for that. Then they finally gave me a decent grade trade. I traded back from 60 and I picked up 70 and 100 with the Raiders, the pick we got back for Darren Waller. They gave me a B for that. At 70, I got Jartavius Martin. They gave me a C+ for this. If Jartavius Martin falls to 89, Nick, I feel like that's an A, and I don't think he will. We'll see if I'm wrong about that, but I think some team is going to view him as their safety too as well, and they're going to take him higher than 89. But they gave me a C+. They gave me a D for Tyler Scott at 92 overall. Don't agree with them, but hey, it's my mock draft. Why would I ever agree with bad grades? It makes no sense. And then 107, I got Dorian Williams. So now I have Deontay Banks corner, Chandler Zavala interior offensive lineman, Jartavius Martin corner/safety, Tyler Scott receiver, Dorian Williams the linebacker. They gave me a B for that at 107. Then I traded and that was after trading 100, 128, 209, 240, 243, and 254 for 107, 117, and 135, really concentrating my picks in the top 135. Then I took Luke Schoonmaker, the tight end out of Michigan, at 117 overall, player I'm definitely very high on. They gave me a C for that. Deuce Vaughn at 135 overall, Nick. They gave me a B- for that. And then finally, Braden Daniels, who I'm going to convert to center out of Utah, and they gave me a C+ for that. So my final grade here was a B from Pro Football Focus after all my trades. And just to go over my draft again, I got 2 defensive backs, Deontay Banks and Jartavius Martin. I got 2 interior offensive linemen in Chandler Zavala and Braden Daniels. I got 1 wide receiver in Tyler Scott with a lot of speed. I got a speedy linebacker with potential coverage skills in Dorian Williams, a tight end in Luke Schoonmaker, who reminds me a little bit of Bellinger, and then Deuce Vaughn to add some juice to my running back room.
Damn, the Eagles in my draft, just looking at the first round, got Quentin Johnston at 10 and then Bijan Robinson at 25. Like, what the hell are they going to do on offense, man? That's crazy. So here's my draft. If you're watching on YouTube, got a B- for the Emmanuel Forbes selection. I don't really care. Like, I like Emmanuel Forbes. I feel like he can get selected at the back end of round 1. Just because of just how good he is as a cornerback. It's just a 166-pound number. It keeps sticking into people's minds, rightfully so. Traded back to get pick 30. Traded back from 25. They gave that a B-. Trenton Simpson was a B. According to them, Jalen Hyatt, the pick that I didn't even love, but I think in the 3rd round, you just have to take that. Top of the 3rd round, they gave that an A. Then I traded back again, got a B- for that. They did not like the Jaquelin Roy pick. Look, that could be a little bit early for Jaquelin Roy, for a player who's not the most consistent, but I do believe the Giants need defensive line value, and I just didn't like how the defensive line room was kind of shaping up at that time. And then I traded again, and then I went with Oluwatimi at 122. Look, that's okay value. I don't love it at that point of the draft, and it's so funny because he's such an accomplished player in terms of his awards. But to me at least, I look at JMS and I look at Joe Tippmann, specifically JMS, and I'm just like, I would much prefer those players. But Tippmann, I do feel like fits what the New York Giants want to do in terms of pulling and things of that nature. They did not like the Caillou Blue Kelly pick at 128. I am 100% fine with that. 2 cornerbacks right there, 2 big, long cornerbacks who I feel like can be starters in this league, more than likely, in Kelly and Forbes. Roshan Johnson, love that pick. They gave it a B. Payne Durham, they gave it a D. I don't really care. 165, whatever. That's fine. Payne Durham at that point of the draft, but Giants don't really have a pressing need for tight end. That's probably why they gave it a D. as well. Traded back again, got Brandon Hill, Shaka Hayward, and Tyson Bagent, the Shepherd quarterback, Division II represent. Even though I was a Division III coach, I'm still representing, the smaller level, anything below the FCS, because FCS, they're still studs. They're not the FBS, but they're still studs up there. But I like the Brandon Hill selection. I think he is somebody who could actually make this team be a special teams asset and also work into some of these smaller quarter type of sub packages that Wink Martindale loves to run. Shaka Hayward, special teams addition, and then Bagent would be a practice squad guy that the Giants would try to develop just as a backup because Tyrod Taylor is not going to be here beyond this season.
Okay, Nick. So let's do, and I'll go over mine first, and you can go over yours. Things you're proud of and things you regret. I'll start with things I'm proud of here. I feel like I gave the Giants a really good chance to upgrade their secondary here with Deonte Banks and Tre'Davious Martin as two of my first three picks. I also feel like I gave the Giants a really good chance to add athleticism and movement skills to their interior offensive line with Zavala and Braden Daniels. I found a way to find speed at wide receiver, which the Giants just pure speed outside of Darius Slayton they do not have right now on the roster in my mind with Tyler Scott. Luke Schoonmaker at just more of a luxury pick for me. Dorian Williams, I gave the Giants a chance to add finally some athleticism and coverage skills to their linebacker core. And then Deuce Vaughn, again, more of a luxury pick, but I like adding that kind of talent. Those are the things I'm proud of. My regrets here, Nick, I didn't at all find a way to address the trenches on the defense side of the ball. I didn't get a single interior defensive lineman or a single edge in this class. The edge is a little more concerning to me than the interior defensive line. I think ultimately, once they re-sign Dexter Lawrence and Barkley, they're going to free up enough cap space to sign A'Shawn Robinson, the interior defensive lineman they've already brought in for a visit. I think basically no one signed him yet, and I think he's waiting for the Giants to free up cap space. That's just a guess of mine. But I think after that, I'll feel way more comfortable about not addressing IDL in this class. As far as edge goes, I'm just going to rock with what we've got. Hope Aziz stays healthy, and hope maybe a player like Darian Beavers can play a little more on the edge, something like that. But it's definitely more of a risk. You're never going to come out of these drafts fully comfortable at all of the positions, especially if you're a team like the Giants still have a lot of work to go on the roster. So those are the things I'm proud of. Those are my regrets. How about you?
Honestly, it's almost the same as what you just went over. Like, I'm proud that I was able to add Emmanuel Forbes and Caillou Blue Kelly to the secondary. I like the fact that I got a versatile chess piece, a sub-package linebacker who I feel like you can start in base, but he might, need some ironing out in Trenton Simpson. I also think you can align him on the edge. Clemson did, and he was solid in that manner. But my biggest regret by far is I didn't get a true edge rusher in this draft. I think the Giants need to find an edge rusher. That was the first thing I was thinking about, but I just never looked at the edge group and felt like, yes, this is great value. I always liked another position group or position player from a different position just a little bit more. So that would be my biggest regret. I like the fact that I got Jalen Hyatt in the third round. I think that's perfect for him at pick 64. I'm completely fine with that, even though I'm not the biggest Jalen Hyatt guy. But I do think his skill set meshes well with what the New York Giants are doing. And I found somebody to possibly replace Saquon Barkley if he does leave the New York Giants after this season in Roschon Johnson, who I think does have some, it's not a certainty, but he does have 3-down capabilities at the next level, depending on how he, acclimates himself to the NFL speed and everything like that. So I think this is a solid draft. I've had better, but I'm okay with it.
I like it. I like your draft a lot. So I feel like both of us kind of accomplished what we were hoping to here. Got some good value at spots too. All right, Nick, let's wrap this thing up. Actually, it could be fun if you're the listeners. Let us know whose draft you like more in the YouTube comments. Yeah. There you go. So before we wrap up today, we're on backload as far as mock drafts that people have sent in that we haven't graded and talked about. So I want to get a couple in here, and then because we're running out of days to do it. Start with Frankinator 8. Thank you for sending in. He used the TDN simulator. He got Joey Porter, 25 overall first. Then he got Joe Tippmann at Wisconsin. Out of Wisconsin with our second round pick. DeMarvion Overshone, who I don't really know much about, the inside linebacker out of Texas at 90 overall or at 89.
Texas inside linebacker, freak athlete, great burst to the tackle point. Doesn't really know what the hell he's doing as a linebacker quite yet, but a really fantastic athlete out there.
He got Charlie Jones, a wide receiver out of Purdue at 129. We know we're going to love that pick. Nick Herbig out of Wisconsin. 2 Wisconsin players in a mock is always going to be a Dan Schneier favorite here at 162. Tyjae Spears fell to 174. He took him. Isaiah McGuire, who we discussed on the last pod, edge out of Missouri, went 211. Jair Brown fell all the way to 242. I kind of like Jair Brown a little bit. Malik Cunningham quarterback out of Louisville at 245, and then Mark Evans, interior lineman out of Arkansas Pine Bluff at 256. Give me a grade and analysis on this one, Nick.
I'm going to give this a nice strong B plus. I think I like Joey Porter falling to 25. I think that's a great value getting that center, whether it be Joe Tippmann or JMS at 58. Completely fine with that. Overshown at 90. I think he would be successful in this defense, but I think Wink Martindale would have to be smart on how he's going to allocate his snaps and when to use him out there, because he's not a complete linebacker. But when you have that type of closing burst and a heavy pressure type of defense, I feel like you can get a lot out of a player like that. So you get him at 90. It's not that bad. Charlie Jones, absolutely love it. Nick Herbig, like it. Tajay Spears, I mean, that's just a home run. I don't know what TDN's doing over there. And I think Isaiah McGuire, you can find a role for a player like that in this defense where it is kind of multiple and you have multiple type of fronts, even though people are pegging him a little bit more as a 4-3 even front type of player. I still think he is someone you could slide inside and you can possibly stand him up on the edge and have him play to the boundary, similar to maybe a Jihad Ward, even though he's a little bit smaller than him. And the last three picks I'm fine with. Brown, I watched his like Northwestern tape, and I can't remember the first game I watched. It might have been Michigan State, and I was like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you, man? Like, he's just like had so many routes going behind him that he was just totally unaware of, and he was trying to bait things, but he wasn't doing it, I would say, judiciously. Like, he was kind of being a little bit reckless with it. And I can't remember the game. I have it somewhere in my notes, but I watched another game of his, and I was like, okay, like I could see you can use him in a versatile type of manner. I wish he was maybe a little bit better as a tackler, but it's 242nd pick. Like, I'm fine with bringing him in. Giants have expressed interest in him. So yeah, I would say B plus. What about you?
This is going to get an A for me, a solid A. I love the pick at 25, Joey Porter. If I can get Porter or Banks out of this class, I'm just so excited. Look, there are issues with Porter's game, and, you know, you could watch a Purdue film and you could just see Charlie Jones beating him, which is not something you want to see. But, man, with that kind of length, that pedigree, that size, that physicality, it's – I think David Syverson, who we're going to have on soon to talk draft with us, tweeted about today. There's like no one, like you talk about outliers in this class. Porter's an outlier in this class, but in the good way. Like we talked about all the bad way outliers, right? This is a good way outlier. And I don't have the exact tweet in front of me, but he's an outlier from just the fact of his size speed combination, his length speed combination is an outlier in this class. There's just not many corners who have his kind of length. And he knows how to use it already. So it's just a matter to me of just fixing the rest of his game. So I think it's an A+ round one. Joe Tippmann is like a solid B-, B, C+, whatever you want to call it, just like a solid pick there at 58. I feel like he's around that range. Both of those centers I have around there. But then the reason this bumps back up to A for me is just that combination of Charlie Jones, Herbig, and Tajay Spears at 129, 162, 174. If that somehow happened, that's just like a sick tangent of players the Giants could just throw in there on day 3. And just, I feel like I'm getting value across the board there. So thank you, Frankinator 8. You get an A from me. Let's do at least one more. Let's do one from Austin Iannetta here, who leaves us a nice message and then gives us his mock. And he goes with Zay Flowers in the first round, falling to 25, which I think is a lot more possible than people originally thought. I'm even not as like excited about it as I was, Nick. It's kind of crazy. There's wide receivers I'm fine with on day 2, honestly. Day 3, like I'll wait for next year's wide receiver class to go with my round 1 capital, to be honest with you. Tyreek Stevenson at corner at Miami at 2nd round pick. Derek Hall, the edge out of Auburn, 3rd round. Jatavius Martin falls to the 4th round in this one. He takes him. Ivan Pace, the linebacker to Cincinnati. Emil Ayokur, how do you pronounce his last name? We just talked about him on last night's pod. Ikior. That's how it was. Out of Alabama, who a lot of people like, interior offensive lineman. John Gaines, who we love out of UCLA. Bryce Ward, Ford Wheaton, just a total size, speed, potential ball of clay at wide receiver out of West Virginia. Yasir Abdullah, linebacker out of Louisville. And then Jared Clark out of Coastal Carolina. What do you think of this draft?
This is an A, strong A for me. Like, look, I'm kind of in the same boat with you where I'm going to be okay if the Giants take a wide receiver at 25. Like, it's on their minds. They're really doing a lot of research into these players. And I'll be okay with it, but I do like a lot of those other players a little bit more in terms of just the value. But if the board shapes up a certain way and it's Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison, they're going to help the offense. They're going to be good players for the Giants. And I trust that this coaching staff will get the most out of them. It's not like he's going to Jason Garrett's coaching staff, right? Yeah. So I'm okay with it at 25. Tyreek Stevenson, I like that at 56. And I've only watched a little bit of him. And I think this guy is going to be like the perfect type of fit for Wink Martindale. I reserve my judgment a little bit on that just because I need to do a little bit more work on Miami's defense. Derek Hall, love that at 89. I think he could fit into this defense very well. Not the most flexible type of guy, but more of a powerful guy, which the Giants also need at edge because you have that finesse type of dude in Azeez Ojulari. Kayvon Thibodeau does have power, but I think Derek Hall adds like another element of power to this defense. Love Martin at 128, pace as a blitzing linebacker to usurp Micah McFadden as an undersized blitzing linebacker, but might actually be better at it. Love that at 160. And then you just have two developmental offensive linemen in Ikior and Gaines. And then, like you said, man, Bryce Ford Wheaton, BFW, we're going to try to make that a thing since this is the draft of acronymed names. BFW, he's just a height, weight, speed guy who blew up the combine, and he just had shitty quarterback play at West Virginia.
That's the hope.
Maybe maybe there's a little bit more meat on the bone there.
Yeah, I think there are some flashes from the little I've watched of Bryce Ford Wheaton where you're like, yeah, if he had better quarterback play, this could work. This is an A for me as well. Just an all-around. This might honestly, yeah, you know what, Nick? I'm taking that back. This is an A+ for me. This is an A+. Yeah. The Zay Flowers is the furthest thing from the A+ for me, but I still, I love Zay Flowers. I can't say 180-pound receiver is anything more than an A at best type of pick, A- type. It's still a size thing for me with him and Jordan Addison. Like, I know in other classes I'm getting these 6'1", 200-pound guys at the same spot. Like, I know I'm getting a bigger prospect there. It just worries me a little. Because I know we can't go wide receiver this year, round 1, Nick, after Wandell last year, and then expect to do it again next year, because we're just not. And I don't know the class next year, but I assume there's going to be better prospects. I just do. But other than that, man, Tyreek Stevenson, Derek Hall, Jartavius Martin, Ivan Pace, and then the two interior offensive linemen who are both great movement skills type guys that we can develop. It's just slamming good. That's A+ style good. So this is an A+ class for me, Austin.
I love it, dude. Let's do one more just because we do have a backlog. And we'll go with, let's see if there's one here. Oh, this one. Okay. Yeah, Be Silky. All right. I love the podcast. I've been listening from the beginning. Be Silky. Thank you. And this guy, since he's been listening from the beginning, he's like, I am going to put 2 mock drafts in here and force you guys to do both. And I'm okay with that. So we will start with the first mock draft that he has. So in the first round, he says 27. Maybe it was a trade back. I'm not really sure. It's not specified. Okay, it does say with trades. Never mind. I'm a freaking idiot. 27, Deonte Banks, cornerback, Maryland. Love it. Joe Tippmann at 59. Love it. Sidney Brown at 89. All right, like that's okay. I like Sidney Brown. I like Jartavius Martin a lot better, but that's fine. Tajee Spears at 91, Charlie Jones at 128, Isaiah McGuire at 134, Jacorian Bennett, the cornerback out of Maryland. So you got both Maryland quarterbacks here at 160. That's an athletic group right there. 219, you go with Charlie Thomas, the linebacker out of Georgia Tech. I don't know that much about him. 217, Byron Young, the defensive lineman out of Alabama. 240, Michael Jefferson, wide receiver. I believe that's out of Louisiana Lafayette, but I could be mistaken there. TJ Bass, offensive guard out of Oregon, and then Chamari Connor, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech, cornerback safety. He's a little bit more of a safety, just kind of like the tweener type of player. For that first mock, Dan, I'm going to give it, let's say I would say a B. Now, I don't know some of these players and I haven't watched them, so it's a little incomplete for me, but I love getting Banks. So I'm going to give a B+ just off that. Joe Tippmann's fine. Sidney Brown, like I get it. I get it. And he, he did step up in big situations at the catch point in 2022. So for that, I do like, but I just, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that consistently in the NFL. That's maybe a conversation for another day. Tajee Spears, running back. Absolutely love that at 91. Love Charlie Jones. Isaiah McGuire, I think is fine at that point of the draft. You get another high upside cornerback who is really athletic, and Jacorian Bennett at 160. So I'm going to give it a B+.
Okay. So you moved up from the B to B+. That's also the grade I give this first mock to the B+. Banks for me is an A+ pick with their first round pick, though he did trade back and still got him. Tippmann, like I've said, I just feel like it's pretty solid average pick at 57, 59 range. He has it here after trade backs. Same thing will go for Schmidt. It's not like average in a bad way. Just like I think these guys are probably about the 50 to 60th best prospects in this class, and I'm okay taking them there. It's not like Banks where I feel like I'm getting a top 10 or top 15 type prospect. To be honest, like Banks to me could be one of the 10 best. Like I don't know, man. Like there's not that many great prospects at the top of this draft. Like even players that people love, like Tyree Wilson. I see it with Wilson, but I don't love it with Wilson. I don't feel like he's as good as some of the other top defensive players in past classes.
I got to say this, though. B Silky's next mock draft is pretty unique, and I want to get your opinion on it.
Okay, we can skip
So
forward to that because we've talked a lot about the other players in his class. I think you broke them down and then B plus for me as well. Let's get to the next mock.
yeah, so it was trade down,
Mm-hmm.
get pick 41, Emmanuel Forbes. Then at 45, he gets John Michael Schmitz. So that's a solid 1-2 punch to start off day 2 right there. I like that. And then he gets at 57 Cedric Tillmans. Now you got your big-bodied wide receiver, and you're like, all right, we're cooking. We're adding some to the offense, adding some to the defense. But then at 89, he goes with Joe Tittman after going with JMS, and he says, move to guard. It's like, that's a bit of a projection. I understand it. A lot of people think Joe Tittman has that type of flexibility. He's bigger. He can move. But imagine going John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tittman. That's unique.
It.
128. I don't know if I like it or not, but it's different, and I appreciate the creativity. Byron Young, the edge from Tennessee, older player, but holy crap, he shot out of a freaking cannon, going up with his first 3 steps up the pass rushing arc. Question his ability to anchor down against the run, but he could be a situational pass rusher for you. Ronnie Hillman out of Ohio State, safety. Roshan Johnson, running back, Texas. The other Byron Young, which is the second time this happened in a mock draft. And he says, yes, 2B Youngs. He's the defensive lineman out of Alabama. Charlie Thomas, a linebacker at Georgia Tech. Yasir Abdullah, edge out of Louisville. And Josh Wiley, the tight end out of Cincinnati.
So what grade do you give that one after the funky trade backs, taking 2 interior offensive linemen at 45 and 89?
Yeah, so I like a lot of the players that he has here. That is a pretty unique situation. I haven't seen this yet. John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tittman in the same draft. I'm going to give it, I guess, a B-, but I don't hate the idea, but I don't see that happening either. So I'm going to go with a B-. I like some of these other players he went with.
I'll go C+ on this one. I just think it's creative, but ultimately the Giants don't end up getting it's hard for me to give it a great grade when in some of these other mocks we're getting Deonte Banks, Joey Porter, even Zay Flowers. And our best player in this draft is Emmanuel Forbes, who I do really like. And you've really made me a fan of him, Nick, but it's so hard for me to think an outlier type player to his extent from a size standpoint is a slam dunk pick, like maybe a Deonte Banks type you would get or something like that. And then John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tittman. I think Joe Tittman can play guard. He's 6'6" with a lot of power to his profile in addition to the movement skills. So taking those 2 guys, and then you have an interior offensive line of future of John Michael Schmitz, Joe Tittman, and Josh Azudu. On paper, it's as great as it gets. But the key thing that we have to keep in mind is on paper, because sometimes these guys just don't work out as expected on the interior offensive line. This is why I'm not a huge fan of investing early picks in interior offensive line. So on paper, it's amazing there. Cedric Tillman, a player who I really like at 57 overall from a value standpoint, but I just worry about Cedric Tillman with Daniel Jones. I'm going to be honest. Until I see it with Jones, I need to see it first with Daniel Jones, that he's going to be able to take advantage of these types of receivers, because right now the receiver that I think Daniel Jones works best with is the Sterling Shepard, the Richie James, the Wan'Dale Robinson types, those types that can just get open early in their routes and you're not throwing them up balls outside of their frame and they're making adjustments to it. Rest of the draft class, pretty solid. Roshan Johnson, obviously the pick I like most. So C+ for me in this one.
Nice. Hey, thank you so much, B Silky.
Yeah, thank you for sending in your mocks, and thank you for being a listener from the beginning. We really appreciate it. To everyone else, if you want to get your mock drafts read and graded and analyzed on air, send them in now. The more you send in, we're going to try our best to get to all of them. Well, if that means we do 5 in one show, that means we do 5 in one show. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.